All right, it's 11:03. Welcome everybody to our monthly talk that we have. Um, we have today Michael Leggett, who's with our engineering division. He's a lead engineer, and he's going to talk to us about something really important, I'm sure. Can't remember what the title of the talk is right off the top of my head. He's been with us for 6 years, and if you have questions for him, remember to drop those in the chat, and we will do that at the end of the presentation. Michael, I give it over to you.
All right, thanks, Corey. Hey, everybody, good morning. Hopefully you can see my screen, but if not, I'm sure somebody will let me know. But this webinar that we wanted to present today kind of focuses on partnerships that we have within and connected to our engineering section. And this is a similar presentation that we did at a spotlight for the commission last summer. And that spotlight kind of generated a lot of questions and a lot of discussions, and all good, all positive. But I think we realized that maybe some of the programs that we have aren't as well known, maybe that we thought. So just wanted to highlight those today, and just a general overview. Our engineering group, we have a supervisor, Gary Gardner. We have 5 engineers. We have 2 in the mountains and 3 kind of in the Piedmont area. Capital projects coordinator, Brad, who works at headquarters, and we have a facility manager, surveyor, 1 construction project manager, and then 3 construction crews. And I'll touch base a little bit more about the construction crews a little bit later. Last but certainly not least, we have David Slade, who runs our WISE program. So what is our WISE program? Well, WISE stands for Wildlife Inmate Services, and it is a joint partnership between the Department of Public Safety and the Wildlife Resources Commission, and it was started in 2006. And the main goal of the program is basically to use a program like this to provide a variety of products that we can use at a lot of our different facilities, but also to provide training and life skills development to individuals who are currently incarcerated at the Dan River Work Prison, which is in Yanceyville. And this is a view of the exterior of the shop. It's directly adjacent to the work prison. Like I said, it's David. He's our full-time employee there. He manages the program, and there's also 1 temporary employee who's responsible for making product deliveries across the state for us. And on any given day, you can usually see between 4 to 12 guys working in the shop from the prison. Like I said, it's directly next door, so it's easy for them to get in and out of. It's a cool shop, got everything they need in there. It also has a lay down yard where a lot of the elements they can produce, they can actually transfer outside. So they've got a really nice facility there to do a lot of good work. So benefits, pretty much if you've been to any of our boat access areas or any of our public fishing access areas, you've seen products that have been produced at the WISE facility. The biggest items are floating docks and floating fishing piers and kiosk and signage. Not only are those products available to us, but other entities like local, city, county, can buy those products from us, as well as other state entities like state parks. They buy a lot of those products. Schools and universities purchase those. So, like I said, those products are available for purchase. They can go to our website, see what products are offered, then contact David and make those purchases. We don't currently sell to private individuals or private companies just because we don't want to overwhelm the program. So those are kind of the benefits that we see on our side. But like I mentioned earlier, it's a very popular program within the prison system. They don't have any problems getting individuals to work there. The hope is that, again, those individuals that work and get carpentry skills and develop life skills that they can then take. And once their time is served, they can leave and re-enter the workforce and use those skills. I kind of a overview of some of the benefits and why it's such a good program, especially for us. We are able to get affordable quality products and such a benefit, especially as it relates to construction and maintenance. When you don't have to worry about constructing floating docks or worry about constructing floating piers, that saves tremendous amount of time. And regardless whether it's state government or not, time is money. It's also very efficient. I mean, you can imagine, having to be on site along with grading operations, along with different elements of construction, and then having to worry about constructing, 4 sections of floating docks, outside in an area. So having a shop that's set up for it, they know what they're doing. They've got the tools, materials. It's almost like an assembly line for them. So again, saves tremendous amount of time, tremendous amount of money. Over the years, we've kind of developed standardized designs that we use. So everything that they produce there is up to code. We don't have to rely on different contractors, different vendors that may add, deviations that we don't really want to see. So it's a huge benefit knowing what we're going to get. And at the same time, we may run into a situation where we want to modify something. Maybe we want to have a floating dock that sits a little closer to the water level, so we can switch out those floats. We have that line of communication with the WISE program, so we can make those tweaks early in the process, and again, know what we're going to get. And I think a little underrated aspect of it, once we have elements maybe out in the field that have reached the end of their life, those elements, whether it's a dock or even a kiosk, can be they can be returned to the facility, and those elements can be refurbished, put back into play if we want to, or they can be surplus and sold to the general public. So there's definitely a reuse aspect there. Products that are offered by the program, I've hit on the main ones: floating piers, floating docks, or informational kiosk. To give an idea as far as production, these numbers are actually from 2022. So for that year, the WISE program produced 116 dock sections. Floating docks, typically 8-foot by 20-foot sections, and not only for us, but for purchase by certain entities. They also produced around 68 floating pier sections. These are a little bit wider, just for the nature of having people be able to fish safely, usually around 12-foot wide. And there's a lot of detail. Handrails and benching for those elements. And again, for the 2022 year, they produced around 130 informational kiosks. So they could produce a significant amount of products, and then kind of goes back to that aspect. We're not having to worry about finding contractors or vendors or having our maintenance or construction guys construct these items out in the field. So it saves a tremendous amount of time. Other products kind of on the left side, signage. I think signage, again, a little underrated. I think for that same year, they produced around 1,300 signs. Comments we'd love to see. They made a lot of those, and traffic signs and regulations and safety informational signage. But they also handle buoys. They can do receive buoys. I think typically do the marking for those, as well as the anchors. And they can construct hunting blinds, ADA accessible shooting blinds, and then even fencing. We get a lot of our fencing from them to put in that. The next couple of slides go through just kind of some of the typical products you'll see that they produce from the Wise facility. This first one is a floating fishing pier at Jordan Lake. I think this is Beaver Creek. Again, our construction crews did the site work. They did the access road, parking lot. They did the ADA accessible parking pad and ADA accessible sidewalk and handrails, and huge benefit just being able to receive this floating pier, float it out into position and attach hinges into place. Standard, this is kind of the cookie cutter fishing pier you probably see produced at most of them. It has an access lane, multiple floats, and then a T section. This is another fishing pier I've recently constructed for Valdez Lake Rodas. It was also, you could see the fishing pier, but I think this speaks to some of the modifications we can add to these elements. The partner for this one really wanted an ADA accessible launch. So not only were we able to come up with a design for the floating fishing pier, but we were also able to modify it and add a section of finger piers, attach an ADA accessible canoe kayak launch. The kind of cookie cutter floating docks. I think this is Pollexville. So again, our crews would come in, do the majority of the site work, have the concrete abutment set in place, and then we'd have the floating docks delivered and then floated and installed. Another section of floating docks. This is for Henson Lake, city of Rockingham. And again, you can see, the traditional product that we'd get from them in that 8-foot wide section of courtesy dock beside the ramp. But then we added 2 finger sections that were a little thinner. I think these are 6-foot sections, a little closer to the water, so that canoe kayak launch users could more easily get down and use those 2 finger sections. Kiosk, again, from the production numbers, the big production item, easily delivered on site, easily replaced kiosks that have been, shot, burned, run over. It happens. So easy to have those on site and quickly put into place. And then signage, I said, the different types of signage that they could produce there is pretty amazing. Not only our diamonds, but addresses, traffic signs, ADA parking signs. So it's a huge benefit having that, especially trying to communicate with the public as much as we do. So that was kind of a specific partnership, I guess, that we operate with public safety. But our engineering group also enters into additional partnerships with local, state, and federal partners with the ultimate goal of just trying to create boating and fishing access sites for the general public. We are set up a little unique, I think, from a lot of different state agencies, in terms of the personnel we have. We do have survey capabilities. We have engineers on staff. We have our own construction crews. We have 3 crews, awesome crew located out west, Chinquapin and Rhodes Pond. And those crews travel the state, constructing access sites, do a fantastic job. So I think when you have all of those elements together, we're kind of like a design build firm in a lot of ways, where we can pretty much do anything in-house, especially as it relates to boating access and fishing access areas. The partnerships that we kind of see come in a lot of different flavors. One is exactly the same, but usually what happens is you have a city or a town or a state partner or even a federal partner that has property, and they have an access point on that property. So they'll approach us. They, for whatever reason, have heard through the grapevine as far as what we can do. And they usually use us to design and permit and then ultimately construct those elements for them. So a lot of times they're providing the property. A lot of times they're actually providing most, if not all, of the funding. And then one of the big benefits is that they are going to be responsible for the long-term maintenance of that site. So that helps us out tremendously as far as saving money on our end and also achieving our goal of producing those access sites. This slide kind of lists some of the partners we have currently in the past, but you know it changes every year. I know right now we've got partnerships or projects in the planning stage or construction stage with Town of Shelby, Surf City, Duke Energy, City of Raleigh. So definitely got a lot of things going on right now. Wanted to spotlight 3 specific partnerships. And the first one is a project we did with the City of Rocky Mount for their Battle Park project, and this was completed early last year. So Battle Park is a historic park in Rocky Mount. If you're headed down 64 toward the coast, you pass right by it. It's been there for a long time. City felt kind of like it had fallen kind of on hard times, and we're really looking at ways to try to renovate the park. And one of the biggest drivers was that to the south of that picture, you can see the Rocky Mount Mills development. If you're familiar with that, it's a old textiles building that was excuse me, purchased by Capital Broadcasting, and they've done a tremendous amount of work as far as excuse me, revitalizing that site. So right now it's got a lot of restaurants, it's got a lot of offices, it has live entertainment, so there's a lot going on right now, and the city felt like with that they wanted to try to renovate Battle Park. They had received tremendous amount of grant funding. I think they received about $1 million in grant funding. Most of it was from Part F to renovate Battle Park. They added mountain bike trails, they added disc golf, they added new restroom facilities. But one of their major goals was to renovate the ramp that was on site. There's an existing ramp on site, and there were 2 existing piers on site. And those areas, you know, very important, especially to the locals, especially from shad fishing. Usually this time of year, it's pretty busy at those sites. Those were historical elements they wanted to renovate, kind of recapture those 3 areas. So they approached us. We had done a ramp just upstream of this location. They were really happy with how it turned out. So they approached us, and like I said, they owned the property. They had grant funding in place that they could pay us to do the work, and they were going to be responsible for long-term maintenance. So this was pre-construction ramp. Ramp was in surprisingly good shape. I mean, the ramp had been there pre-1960. Only problem is the end section had broken off, and that was their biggest complaint. A lot of people run off the end of the ramp. That sign says in that picture 20 feet till the end of the ramp, and it's about 6 feet. So that was their major concern there. So the Rhodes Pond crew was responsible for construction on this one. They came in, demoed the ramp, installed a new ramp in the same general footprint. They did extend it a little further out into the river, added a vertical curve to make it an easier transition between the ramp and the parking area, and replaced the sign. So the sign's in the right place now. This is fixed pier number 1. Again, considering the age of the pier, it wasn't in great shape, but it was surprisingly held up pretty well. But a lot of issues as far as ADA accessibility down to the pier. There was a seal outer band on the pier in this instance that had broke, so the corner of the pier was kind of sagging, and you could see in the picture it's kind of chained off. They were trying to keep people out of there, but every time we were down there, somebody had hopped over and were fishing off of it anyway. So we came in, ripped out the existing pier. This is a fixed pier in the same general footprint. We didn't want to deviate too much, and an ADA accessible ramp with handrails down to the pier. We also added a canoe kayak launch adjacent to the pier. The city really pushed for that. They wanted to have a launch area kind of away from the existing ramp. And this was pier number 2. Again, not in horrible shape. This section of the river was a little bit closer to the dam, so it received a little bit more of the siltation. So it kind of backs up on the backside of that pier. You can kind of see maybe some of the dirt kind of enclosing in around it, and that was causing some rot issues. In a tricky location. This was a pier off the beaten path, so we had to get creative as far as how we were getting down there to it without disturbing too much of the buffer area. This was the final finished product. Again, fixed pier, same general footprint, ADA accessible. But that was a partnership that turned out really well. And one thing I like to point out anyway, before we actually knew we were able to do this work, we weren't sure if we were going to have an opening on our construction schedule to do it. So in the interim, the city actually put these 2 piers and the ramp out for bid. In regards to the construction work, they received 1 bid back for $314,000. So that's the only bid they received. We were able to complete the work for $187,000. So we ended up saving the city of Rocky Mount $126,000. And that was grant funding that they could take and to put into other areas. So they were able to do some other elements that they wanted to on site with that additional savings that we were to help them with. Super happy with it. People have been using it. They actually want us to do 3 additional piers upstream of the dam for them here coming up. So they're happy with it. We're happy with it. Second partnership, a little bit different. So Rocky Mount, that's kind of an urban area. This is town of Randleman. This also was completed early last year. So this was an existing site, not really established. There's an existing textile mill there. It's not currently operated, obviously, but there's an existing dam. And just south of that dam in the picture, you can see kind of a beach area, and that's a pretty popular local hangout spot. A lot of people go down there and fish. A lot of people go down there to launch float vessels, whether it's canoes, floats, kayaks. The only issue with it's not a dedicated parking spot on site. So what would happen would be people would just parallel park along Worthville Road so that they can then access that beach area. And having been out there, I can tell you that Worthville Road is not a slow road. I think it's 45 mile per hour posted, but it is not, people do not travel 45 miles per hour down that road. So kind of a dangerous situation, and our enforcement guys really put us in touch with the town. They really kind of drove this project because I think they saw really the need for safety standpoint, is a popular spot too. I mean, to get an access point there was important. Well, it just happened to work out that the town of Randleman owns the property south of Worthville Road. Big chunk of land, I think over 100 acres. So, you got to once the parties got together, do an MOA with them to try to establish a access area. Again, this was a little bit different partnership because not too different, but they owned the property, and they were supplying $50,000, and we would supply the rest of it. But we were getting access point on the Deep River, so I think it really worked out as beneficial to all parties involved. This is pre-construction, obviously. The bridge is to the right of the screen. You can see the road there. So we met on site early on, trying to figure out, what our access points are, where we could add parking, where we could add a ramp. The town was very interested in a ramp because it's a little easier access, more accessible for a larger number of people, but it's also good for their swiftwater rescue operations that they wanted to have in place. The good thing about the site, there was an existing road that came in. It was soil, and a lot of people were using it just as kind of a dirt path, an ATV path to access the existing light line. And there's an existing light line on site that runs left to right. You'll see it a little bit better in the next picture. But that was a really good open spot that we were able to use for parking. And then we found an open area kind of right in the center of the screen that had some existing trees that had been that had fallen down and had kind of a zone of debris collection that was preventing additional vegetation from being established. So we kind of picked that zone for a ramp. And this is a post-construction drone shot, and you're going to look at this and you're going to say, "My God, Michael, you killed millions of trees." But that's not the case. So that existing access path was already there. We did widen it. The light line was already in place. So we were able to use that area for parking and turnaround and ramp area. We ended up removing probably about 3 trees that were over 6 inches each. One of them was dying. Keep in mind too, this picture was taken February of last year. No vegetation growth. There's another drone shot of just the ramp area. We decided to go with a 12-foot wide ramp, a little bit smaller than what we usually do, just because we wanted to keep impacts as minimal as possible. We also understood that people using this section of the river probably aren't going to be putting their $80,000 bass boat in. It's going to be more geared toward John boats and float users. So in regards to, this is a green up shot. So, kind of going back to that partnership aspect of this, they provide the property. We did design, permitting, and construction. They added $50,000 to the cost, and I think the total cost was around $140,000. So for $90,000 of our cost, we get a public access area with a ramp, ADA parking, and upwards of 20 parking spots. The last partnership I kind of want to touch on is one that has not been queued for construction yet. We're hoping this will get started here in the next month or two, maybe around April or May. This is a partnership with the city of Lumberton at the existing Scottish packing facility. So this is an old meat packing facility on the Lumber River. And this site is about half a mile south of downtown Lumberton, so urban area. It's on the west side of the Lumber River. And if you're familiar with Lumberton, you know that the west side of Lumberton has a unfortunate history of flooding. This area is devastated recently with Matthew, I think in 2016, and Florence a couple of years later. So obviously, this meatpacking facility has been shuttered for a number of years, and given its location, located in a floodway, so given that location, the chances of it being repurposed in regards to residential or commercial are pretty much non-existent. So the city kind of realized that, kind of realized the property, and ended up purchasing this parcel a number of years ago. I think 2019 they ended up purchasing this parcel. They this is a better shot of another drone shot of the actual facility. You can see a bunch of buildings up tight against the Lumber River. It's really hard to walk around the building and get around there so close to the river. A lot of different materials: brick, sheetrock, tile, asphalt shingles, a lot of bad stuff. So you can see it's in close proximity to the river. Obviously, it floods. So when it floods, it's a flood issue, because you've got a lot of walls in place, acting flood of the river, and then you also got a lot of material, a lot of debris that could be picked up offsite and then carried down the river. So it's an issue in a lot of different ways, and the city realized that and purchased the property. So we had done a fixed pier north of this property around 2019, and city was very excited about that. Approached us about trying to do something on this site, and at the same time, the city was working with the NC State's College of Design. They have a Coastal Dynamics Design Lab, trying to come up with different master plans for the site. And this was kind of their overall vision for what the site could be. They wanted to remove most of those buildings on site, try to institute some educational aspects, like an education center, because this site is within, I guess, within a quarter mile of elementary school. So they thought that they could kind of try to bring in some of that, get some elements of the community involved. So they wanted kind of an education aspect to it. They also wanted to institute some boardwalks to try to highlight the property's existing cypress trees that were on site. And they also wanted to add a boat launch, because the city of Lumberton does not have a proper boat launch within their sphere of influence. And again, they wanted a site the community could use, but also a site that their swiftwater rescue teams could use. And that all given the flood, I mean, that's given their flood history. I think that is probably a huge benefit to have a boat launch at this location. So again, we haven't done construction on this one. We partnered with them, signed the MOA. They own the site. They want us to design, permitted it, and ultimately construct it. And the budget for this one was $185,000. And I think they've already received $250,000 from a environmental enhancement grant, just for the boat ramp and parking area. The Lumber River, some of you may know, is a wild and scenic designated river. So not only did we have Corps permits and DEQ permits, we also had to go through the National Park Service to get approval to impact this section of the Lumber River. And typically on wild and scenic sections, we would not be allowed to put concrete ramp on a section of river like this. But Park Service saw the existing state of the property. They kind of saw what the ultimate vision was, and they were pretty enthusiastic about approving the project. So it wasn't too cumbersome of an approval process. So we have all our permits in place, and this is ultimately kind of what we came up with in regards to just the boat ramp and parking area. The vision for this would be that the parking area could be used for the future educational centers or for people, the future boardwalk. And with, again, a smaller 12-foot wide ramp than what we would usually do. But again, we wanted to limit the impacts. We understood that this was wild and scenic designated river section. And we also went with a little bit less, a little bit smaller courtesy dock, 6-foot wide, as opposed to our 8-foot wide dock, so that we could limit impacts to that bank area. I finished a little early, but what I did want to touch on, the biggest question that we get when we're building ramps specifically is how do we do it? So I thought I just got a couple slides. I just wanted to go through that in case people had some questions about that. So this is some pictures, just pictures of a renovation we have going on right now at the Lillington ramp. So what we do typically for old ramps or for new ramps, in this instance, we tore out the old ramp. We typically come in, grade the ramp area to a 14% slope. That's what we find, and I think it's universally found as an acceptable slope for a ramp. So we come in, we grade it, we add usually 12 inches of riprap, and then we choke that riprap with another 6 inches of ABC stone. So we want to have a strong base. We then come in and form up the ramp section that we want to see, and this is called our push slab. So we make that whatever ramp we called for width-wise in that section. So the guys in the field frame it up and lay down section of rebar and use 4s, typically left to right, and then number 7s up and down. And in this instance, the rebar here looks a little different because we're experimenting with some fiberglass rebar, which so far has worked out pretty well. But we use steel rebar most of the time. We're starting to dabble in fiberglass just because it's just as strong and a lot easier for the crews to maneuver around. So once they have the rebar in place, then yeah, that's another section, a little of the view of the rebar push slab section. So once they have the rebar in place, they pour the slab, usually around 8 inches of concrete, and then they'll trowel the top of it to create grooves to provide friction. It also provides a little channel to get water and sand away from the ramp. So they'll form it. We'll let it sit in place, harden up, and then once it's hardened up, then we'll have a bulldozer. The poor picture, but you can kind of see the bulldozer at the top of the screen. So once that concrete's hardened in place, then we'll have a bulldozer come in and push it kind of down the slope into place to the ultimate spot that we want it at. Sometimes we use one bulldozer for larger, wider ramps. We obviously have to use 2. So that's kind of the question I get 90% of the time from a lot of people is how do we construct a ramp? So hopefully that addresses some of those questions. But that's pretty much all I had.
All right, thanks, Michael. Very informative talk. For those of you that have any questions, drop those into the chat. One question I have, Michael, is about how many like BAA, PFA projects does your group tackle a year? Like finish probably is the right word, because I know you got stuff that's ongoing all the time.
Yeah, we have I mentioned earlier, we have 3 crews. We have a balsam crew, and then Chinkapin crew, and a Rhodes prawn crew. Depending on the year, those crews are each probably doing, 4 to 5 projects each a year. So anywhere from 10 to 15 projects a year is probably what they're going to be able to start and finish within a year.
Okay. Just waiting to see if anybody's got any questions. We'll give them a minute or so. One question we have here, who would be responsible for cleaning up the site if there are abandoned buildings, etc.? Guess that goes back to your Lumberton.
Yeah,
area.
so a lot of those times, we'd rely kind of on them to do that. With Lumberton specifically, Lumberton's gonna, and they're in the process of doing demolition for that site. Going into a partnership, probably the best thing is being clear what everybody's responsibilities are. We certainly don't want to get bogged down in doing things that are kind of outside of our realm as it relates to recreational construction. So we kind of set it up to where probably the partner would be the main entity responsible for that.
All right. Another question is, well, one is a comment. Thanks for all of your and your crew's hard work. But the question is, if a municipality asks, who should we send them to for potential partnerships?
I think Gary Gardner would be the best contact for that. He's our supervisor for their engineering section.
Gary might have just screamed no in his
Yeah,
office. I don't know.
I was smiling when I said that. So.
Oh, all right, good. So Gary Gardner. All right. Well, that looks to be all the questions we have. Once again, Michael, thank you. We will see all of you next time. Thank you so much.